Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Retro Wrestling Room. We are here with a very, very special guest today. I have two verys today because it's somebody who I have watched for years and years, and I'm so excited to finally get on the channel. We are here with the former NWA television champion. We are here with the former NWA US champion. We have the US, oh, I apologize. We have the Russian nightmare, Nikita Koloff, on the channel. How's it going, Nikita?
Hey, Benji, great to be with you. Hey, it's funny you open up with those two title belts because hold on here. Uh
Oh,
TV championship belt, right? The World TV belt and a replica of that US belt that you were just talking about.
oh,
So
wow.
there you go. I got those two just happen to be handy here.
It was as if we planned it.
That's right. That's right. That's very good.
Um, First off, we're just out of WrestleMania season in the WWE, and somebody very special to you went into the Hall of Fame this year. Uncle Ivan went into the Hall of Fame this year. How great was it to finally see him going into that Hall of Fame?
Well, it's a great question, and thank you for having me on. By the way, yeah, I'll share more with you. I have some connections to England, but I'll hold off on that.
Oh,
We'll
wow.
keep viewers in suspense for a moment, okay?
Yes, definitely.
I actually have had two close friends, of course, Uncle Ivan and Lex Luger. But we'll first talk
Yes.
about Uncle Ivan. I'm really thrilled. I was thrilled to hear that you might say that we're finally inducting him into the Hall of Fame. I know even post wrestling, he and I became really, really close friends. And, he was very hopeful of being inducted while he was still living. I know his wife, Renee, really well, and she too was hopeful that that would have happened, but it didn't for whatever reason. And so I couldn't say I'm more thrilled, Benji, when people would say to me, "You need to be in the hall," and I would always say, "Uncle Ivan needs to be in the hall way before I need to be in the hall." And so, absolutely ecstatic that he is now been inducted.
And like you said, another very special guest or a special friend of yours, Lex Luger. And we will get on to, obviously, you've got the t-shirt on, we got the background going. You and Lex actually run something called the Man Camp together that runs a couple of times a year, right?
Yeah, we do. You've done your homework. That's exactly right. We just finished up one in April, and we do one in April, one in October in a little town called Royston, Georgia. And he and I have been doing those for several years now, and just bringing guys in to equip and empower them. Give them the tools to just be better husbands and better fathers and grandfathers, whatever their role is out in the marketplace. And we can talk more about that later. But yeah, so Lex is very near and dear to my heart as well. We have become really, really good friends. We reunited in 2006, and part of where the camp came from was when he lived with me for about 10 months in 2015. And so from that we launched the camp. But I can't say it enough. Excited for Lex to be in the hall too. I know a lot of people over the years were really hoping he'd get in, and I think he was just recently with you guys over there in England. Him and Sting and a whole bunch of the guys were there in England.
Yeah, we've got a big convention over here for the love of wrestling. I think that runs a couple of, or they do a couple of different shows across the UK, but they do one big one a year. But yes, Lex was actually over here not too long ago.
Yeah, I think in the spring, right? In March
Mm.
or sometime in the spring, they do that big one. Well, that's pretty amazing. So, well, thank you for highlighting both Uncle Ivan and Lex.
Yeah, it's amazing to see them both going in because they, obviously Ivan held, the big WWF championship way back when, even beating people like Bruno Sammartino, these legendary characters. And Lex, obviously I saw growing up was a big part of my childhood in NWA, WWF, WCW as well. And it was amazing to finally see them going in. How proud was it for you to finally see, these two going in? What did it mean to you to see them finally getting those accolades?
Yeah, it's special. I mean, there's there's a lot of different accolades over the years that we have, had the privilege of being a part of. Whether it's a Hall of Fame or nowadays, the Comic Cons, the Legends signing events, whether it's there in England or all across America. I think one of the and I think I could speak for Lex and Ivan when he was alive and with us, that we would frequent many of those signings and to meet the fans, greet the fans, take pictures with the fans is something special. And then for those guys, for me, the Hall of Fame was just really kind of the icing on the cake, a tribute to their hard work in the ring. You mentioned Ivan dethroning Bruno Sammartino. In fact, when Lex first came into the NWA, this U.S. belt right here was one of the first major titles he would win when he defeated me in the cage in Greensboro, North Carolina, with J.J. Dillon in his corner.
Wow, okay. That's amazing to think about. That you have that history all the way back to like one of his major title wins as well. Was it 2006 you said you kind of rekindled that friendship?
Say it again.
Was it around 2006 you said you rekindled that friendship with Lex?
It is. Of course, I left anyone who knows my story, and if they're not that familiar with my story, I actually wrote a book about it, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption, and then I went in the studio, Benji, a couple of years ago, and I did it on Audible, so they can, in my own voice. I wanted people to hear my life story in my own voice, and so they can download the Audible audio version of that. But that said, yeah, so Lex and I were essentially in the ring, either against each other or at times tagged up with each other. I'd say essentially from 1980, 86, 87, kind of in that era, until 1992, when I chose to walk away from wrestling. Now, I would see him one more time in 1995, but then I didn't see him again until the summer of 2006. So there was about an 11-year gap in there that he was off in one direction and I was off in another direction.
Um, when you first started your wrestling career, it was a very unusual start to a wrestling career. It wasn't the usual path of going to your local wrestling school, starting off, then starting on the local indie scene. You were kind of thrown in to the deep end, and not just the deep end of one of the biggest promotions in the US at that time. How did that all come about for you?
Yeah, so the shorter version of that, just for sake of time, so you can get as many questions in as you'd like to get in. The shorter version is, I was an athlete growing up. I played high school, college football, the American version, not the English version, but the American version of football, and have my sights set on one day playing professional football, the NFL. And I was training for that when some of my buddies had gotten involved. Barry Darso, who was Demolition, as well as Crusher Khrushchev, and the Repo Man. He had several characters that he portrayed. Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, myself. There were a number of guys from my high school, and then from our city, the Road Warriors, Animal, and Hawk. In fact, I recruited Road Warrior Animal out of high school to play college football with me. He would eventually, Benji, drop out of college, get into pro wrestling, And he eventually gets the credit for calling me and sharing the idea of a nephew for Ivan Koloff. And from that, a 5-minute phone call with the promoter, Jim Crockett, in Charlotte, North Carolina, he gave me a date and a time to be there. And from that 5-minute phone call, with no amateur wrestling experience, no professional training, I had never hit a ring rope, I showed up the day he said to be there, and Nikita Koloff's born in the hallways of Charlotte, and I debut the next night in Raleigh, North Carolina on television, having never stepped in a wrestling ring ever before.
I mean, on paper, that's a recipe for disaster. So many things should have gone wrong, but it just seemed to click so well.
It did, and you accurately described it when you said thrown into the deep end, or another expression could be, trial by fire, right? I mean, I was just like thrown into the fire, if you will, into the fray. And what I want your viewers to understand is, when I say no experience, I mean they showed me a couple basic things in the dressing room before I went to the ring that night. I joke and say no pressure. There was all kinds of pressure, right? And fortunately, I was able to pull it off, and they kept the match very, very short. But my association with Ivan Koloff and his partner at the time, they were the world tag team champs, Don Kernodle, I was instantly hated, like right out of the gate. They didn't know who I was, Benji, from Adam, but I was immediately hated. And then what we did for the next couple 3 months is Don and Ivan and I would get to the towns 2 or 3 hours early, and they would teach me the mechanics of wrestling. I'd have a short match. I'd sit in their corner every night, because back in those days, we had matches virtually every single night. And then on the drive back home every night, we would then talk about the old school psychology of wrestling, why they did what they did when they did it. And fortunately for me, Benji, I guess you might say I was a good student and a quick study.
Well, do you think you probably learned just as much in the ring on the job as you did in those car journeys as well?
Yeah, I think it was a combination, really. So we're getting those towns, and I'm they're showing me the mechanics, and then I'm going out each night and trying to perfect what they're showing me earlier that night, before the fans showed up. And then the ability to sit in their corner that close every night and just watch everything they did and watch fan reaction to what was going on around me, and then be able to discuss it in real time every night on the way home, certainly had a lot to do with my meteoric rise in pro wrestling.
We briefly mentioned that college that you went to that seemed to spawn all these amazing, not just athletes, but wrestlers. Got clips of a few of them here. We had, obviously,
There he is.
Gary
Yeah.
Darso, we had John
Gary
Nord,
Darso.
there was
Yeah.
John Nord, there was Tom Zenk, obviously Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude. What was it about this college that kind of bred all these amazing, not just amazing athletes, but amazing wrestlers?
Well, let me clarify. We didn't all, there's John Nord. Yeah, Nord the Barbarian. He and I actually graduated the same year. Benji, this is what Tom Zenk, the Z-Man, this wasn't the same college. This was the same high school.
Wow.
So we didn't come from different towns. We all lived in the same town, which is even crazier when you think about it. There were 7 of us. And then some of the other guys that came into the picture, like the Road Warriors, like Scott Norton, like, the Minnesota Record, Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom, those guys were from the same city, but we're from the same high school. Somebody one day, maybe it's you, Benji, somebody needs to do a documentary on Robbinsdale High School because it's crazy. I joke and say it must have been in the water tower, must have been in the water, the minerals.
It must have been. There's definitely something going on there. It's not right to have that much talent in one high school. It's just not fair.
It's a fascinating story for most people.
Your very first match was against a young Barry Horowitz at the time. It was going by the name of Bret Hart, which is really confusing for people who grew up with the Bret Hart.
Yeah.
What was it like wrestling him at the time? And did he realize that you've never been in the wrestling ring before on that first match?
That's a great question, and I commend you. You've done your homework, man. That's impressive. So yeah, when I tell that story and I say Bret Hart, people are like, "Oh my gosh!" I'm like, "Yeah, but not the Hitman. It wasn't the Bret Hart, right?" The minute I say he later went on to become, Barry Horowitz, they're like, "Oh, okay." Well, I saw him. True story. I saw him like 25 years later. And I had never asked him. So I took the opportunity. I said, "Hey, Bret, out of curiosity, I need to know. The night I debuted was against you." And of course, obviously, he remembered that, right? I said, "Did they happen to tell you that I had never stepped into a professional ring prior to that night?" And he goes, "Well, they left that important piece of information out." And I said, "Well, it was probably a good thing, or you probably would, maybe you wouldn't have went to the ring. I don't know, but probably a good thing that they left it out."
Um, we talked about this meteoric rise that you had, and it really was because 1 year in, you won the tag team championships with Ivan. What was it like tag teaming with Ivan? I guess like when you were watching him in that corner, you were just learning so much. But did you learn even more when you actually were tagging with him as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, he and you see the chain being used there. He actually handed down from Koloff to Koloff his original chain. Um, that yeah, and he blessed me with that, and then he had another one made for himself, and custom made for himself, and I still have that original one. So my children or my grandchildren will figure out what they might get to do with that chain one day. I think it's up in the attic somewhere. But yeah, to be in the ring with a guy like him, legendary in my view, in my personal view, just legendary. To be able to be in the ring with the fans got to appreciate some of those clips that you just showed them, and to learn from him. So it's one thing to sit in the corner, and it's another thing to be standing on the apron and watching him work firsthand, and then being able to glean everything from him. And of course, and Don Canota, we also became the 6-man tag team champions, as well as the world tag team champions, all of that within my first year. So that led to me, Benji, getting into the ring with some of the guys like you just showed, Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert, Ricky the Dragon, Steamboat, Blackjack Mulligan, Dory Funk Jr., and so many other legendary guys that first year that I was able to learn from. Really, Dusty Rhodes, and then, of course, obviously, we'd eventually become the Superpowers. But I was able to learn from a lot of guys, but certainly Ivan and Don get quite a bit of the credit to that meteoric rise.
To your credit, I think a lot of people who were maybe thrown into that position and did have that meteoric rise, a lot of people could have said that the quickness of the success could have gone to their heads. But we don't usually hear that about you, which is something that is really commendable because it very much could have. Was that like almost like something that was in your head at the time that you didn't want it to go to your head, or was it just not in your makeup at the time as well?
That's a great question. I really don't. Honestly, I don't think I've ever been asked that question that way before. So it is a great question. I realized, I guess you might say early, and maybe it was a part of my makeup. And, in fact, you see in my little box there, it says coach, right? Anyone who does a call with me, it says coach. And people, well, what exactly does that mean? And when I look back at my football career, when I was a weightlifter and a bodybuilder, I embraced from a very young age, actually the age of 12, that I wanted to be a good student and coachable, and realizing that the student never exceeds the teacher, the master, right? That you always are, you're always humble and grateful for everything you're being taught. So when I broke into pro wrestling, I just came into it, Benji, with that same approach, to remain humble, learn everything I could, really, in a sense, just kind of keep my mouth shut and learn from some of the best of the best of the best. And then, Benji, just be grateful for the opportunity I had. A lot of people ask me, why didn't you go on to the WWF? Why didn't you, go do this, that, or the other? And I'll be glad to explain that to you if you like me to. But all that said, um, I approached it with that attitude, and then have tried to maintain that even post retirement when I go out for autograph signings, realizing if it wasn't for the fans and your viewers, I would have never had the career I had. And so I always try to accommodate the fans as well even now when I go out.
Uh, It would be amiss if we didn't talk about one of the great feuds, not just of your career, but of all time within the NWA, especially. And that was the feud with Magnum TA, the best of seven series, which is still talked about today as being one of the best, if not the best of seven series of all time. What was it like wrestling with Magnum? And why do you think you two just really gelled so well together?
Well, I think even from those clips you're showing right there, obviously people can see he had a great build. So I had a pretty decent build, which, hey, by the way, let me just, I'm going to get to that in just a moment. That clip you just showed with the contract signing,
Yes.
with his mom at the table. Here's something your viewers may not know. His mom was not smart to the business. Like, he didn't smarten her up to what was going to happen. So when he comes over the table and attacks us and we virtually leave him laying, the response your viewers are going to see from on her face was like the real deal. Like, that was real. Like,
Oh, yeah.
she's like, "Oh my gosh, they're killing my baby," kind of thing. So, anyway, those are some incredible clips you just showed there. He had a great build. People really embraced him as kind of that all-American looking guy, and he was believable. So when you match him up with my build and then his build and look, there was such a sense of believability between the two of us. And then the word chemistry comes to mind. I believe, and I feel I had good chemistry with most of the guys I worked with, but by far, he ranks up there as probably one of the best, one of the top. And to this day, to your credit, it is still the most talked about of my career, is that best of seven, uh, for this belt right here, this U.S. television, or excuse me, U.S. Heavyweight belt. And the way we unfolded the story with the best of seven, and I know they have since had other series like that, but up to that point, I don't think there was ever anything ever done like that, other than a 2 out of 3 falls, maybe, or something. So it really set a benchmark for what would happen in the future. But yeah, just grateful. And Magnum and I are the best of friends to this day. We just recently spoke at one of our wrestling buddies' gyms in Charlotte. We teamed up together and spoke over there at his gym, and so yeah, just great memories with Terry. Just incredible memories working with Terry.
It's amazing because when we talk about the great feuds in wrestling, they're usually the feuds that go on for almost decades. They just keep going, and they go back to the feud. It starts again. Something else happens. It starts again, maybe in a different promotion. But with both of you, with your careers so short, the fact that it's still talked about so fondly, and it's still thrown out there as one of the greatest feuds, but really the feud didn't last all that long, to be honest.
Well, it didn't, and part of the reason, of course, as I'm sure your viewers are aware, it was his accident that ended his career, right?
Yeah.
And he was just days away from signing a legitimate contract for the world heavyweight title. He was, being they were preparing him to be the next Ric Flair.
Yeah.
That's what they were preparing him to do. And so if you and I were to do a what if, in other words, what if the accident hadn't happened? Benji, I don't know two things. One, I don't know that I ever would have turned babyface. I may have stayed heel, bad guy, my whole entire career, possibly. The second thing, had he not had the accident and went on to win the world title, think about it. I can almost guarantee you we would have had a best of 7 for the world heavyweight title.
Yeah.
That we would have had a best of 7. I mean, we could have, to your point, we could have stretched that angle out over years and years. I mean, flag against flag. He gets a tag team partner. I get a tag team partner. I've got Ivan at that point. He gets Dusty, because him and Dusty were teaming up. So America's team versus the Russians. I mean, there's potentially so many matches and angles that we could have done that I'm certain would have made money for Jim Crockett and would have made money for he and I.
Another big what if within your career was the fact that outside of wrestling, you got down to the final 3 to become Ivan Koloff. What am I talking about? Ivan Drago.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got that wrong. One of my favorite films, and I still managed to get that wrong there. You got down to the final 3 to become that part. That is also one of the biggest what ifs. How did that opportunity come about to you?
So the short version on that is Terry Funk. So for those who know Terry and Dory Funk Jr. and Terry Funk, Terry and Sylvester Stallone had become friends. In fact, Terry was in some of his movies. I think Paradise Alley and a few of Sylvester's movies. And the way I understand the story, so Sly calls Terry and says, "Hey, we're going to do another Rocky. We're going to do a Rocky IV, and we're going to have a Russian boxer. Like the main character is going to be Russian. Do you know any Russian guys in your business that could maybe be that guy?" And so Terry and Don Kernodle were best of friends. So Terry calls Don and he shares with him, they send me a script. So I had that about a month in advance. And kind of a little backstory on that, Jim Crockett wasn't going to let me do it. He was afraid I would get the part. And all that time they invested in me, that he wouldn't get his financial return out of it, right? And to Dusty Rhodes' credit, Dusty said, "Jimmy, man, if he lands the part, yeah, he might be gone for a few months filming, but man, think about when he comes back.
Exactly.
I mean, business will explode." And so to Dusty's credit, he kind of talked Jimmy into letting me do it. And to be out there, obviously I didn't get the role. All that said, I was too big. Like I was 285 pounds, 8% body fat. I'm 6'2". Stallone's 5'6", 160 pounds. The director later told me it's just the size difference was just too much. But again, to your what if I had landed Ivan Drago, yeah, there's no telling what would have transpired after that. You know what's funny, Benji, about that whole story too? The wrestling fans are the greatest. You guys are the greatest, right? I didn't know this, but obviously in the movie, Ivan Drago, his coach in the movie, his coach's last name in the movie was Koloff.
Right.
And a fan just a few years ago said, "Hey, I hope you got residual income off this." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And I went and researched it. Sure enough, I'm like, "Really, Stallone? Really? You're going to lose Ivan's name and the Koloff name, but, but we don't get any credit for that? Come on, man. Come on." But no, Stallone was first class, super guy. We were on the set together, enjoyed being around him, talking with him. But that was just another one of those wasn't meant to be things.
That's it. You spent a short amount of time towards, I think it was the end of '89, beginning of '90, in Vern Gagne's AWA. And you were thrown into the main event scene straight away there. I think the champion was Zabisco at the time. When you went to the AWA, how much did it differ from Jim Crockett from what you knew? Was there any glaring differences when you went there?
So part of why I did that, so I want the fans to understand why I did that. The AWA and the NWA, Vern Gagne and Jim Crockett were collaborating on some shows, like the Meadowlands in New Jersey, for example, was one of the big, huge shows that we collaborated together on. So, you had Nick Bockwinkel and Stan Hansen and some of their heavyweight champions on the card. You had Ric Flair and the Koloffs and Road Warriors. And so, Kurt Hennig, a lot of different guys were on those cards together. And so I didn't technically leave the NWA to go do AWA. I went, with Jim Crockett's permission, kind of his blessing, I went to help Vern, knowing that his organization was beginning to struggle. And so I mainly went up to do some of their television tapings and then a few of their house shows, world title matches against the living legend, as you said, Larry Zbyszko, and to try to help their organization continue to be around is mainly why I did that.
You also spent a little time in All Japan Pro Wrestling as well. We mentioned him earlier with Barry Della, so we got a few clips here from that time there. Obviously, going there and it's a completely different culture again. There may be differences between AWA and Jim Crockett, but going to a completely different country, what was that experience like for you?
Japan was unique in and of itself.
Yeah.
As people can see from those clips, yeah, I mean it's just a whole different mindset from what I was used to. I mean those guys, I mean the fan response, and then the language barrier in working with some of those guys, although a good majority of them, I was convinced knew English, but sometimes it seemed like they acted like, oh, don't know what you're saying. I'm like, I think you know more of what I'm saying than you're leading on. But so definitely a challenge though, because I made 2 tours over there solo by myself. and then a tour with Darso, some of the clips you just showed. Man, you're taking me down memory lane, Benji. This is amazing. Thank you for showing those clips. A lot of those, you kind of out of sight, out of mind. You kind of forget about. But Japan to this day, I was just at a business meeting last night, and somebody was asking me because I've been to 36 different countries now, and I've traveled to all 50 states. And what ranks right up there at the top is my trips to Japan back in those wrestling days. I really enjoyed that country, and then how they treated us. I mean, they treated us like royalty, man. I mean, they were the best of the best of the best in how they treated us. And so nothing but great memories about Japan.
Were there ever any thoughts or offers coming your way about possibly doing longer tours there? Because like people like Terry Gordy or Brody, Stan Hansen, they became these legendary characters there because they spent so much time there. Was there ever any possible offers towards you to go there for like a longer period of time?
Well, great question, because typically, so give your fans an education here. Typically, it was a 4 or 5 or 6 week tour if you went to Japan. Normally, the reason I only went for like a week or sometimes 2 at the most, again, is because you might say I was on loan from Jim Crockett. And Crockett did not want me gone for a month or 5 or 6 weeks. So he was okay with me being gone for a week or 2, but not an extended period of time.
Right.
And honestly, as much as I enjoyed it, I don't know if I had to stay there for 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, some of those guys got rather exhausted into those last few weeks they were there. In fact, some of those guys would get mad at me, like, I'm like, hey guys, headed back to the States, see you later. And they'd be mad, because I'm like, how did you work it out where you only had to come for a week or 2, But all that to say, because of my success in America, I was able to have that kind of leverage with the Japan office, and because of Jim Crockett, to only keep those tours short.
We talked about Barry Darso when he went to the WWF. He became obviously Smash from Demolition. Was there any talk of you joining him at that time?
He actually wanted me to. Well, he invited me to go with him. And I guess you might say, had I said yes and accepted that offer, there might not have been a Bill Eadie. I don't know. And when he approached me with that, I thought to myself, a couple things I thought to myself, just to be, straight up full transparency. I'd worked so hard on the Russian Nightmare character, right? I mean, I legally changed my name to Nikita Koloff. I was learning a few Russian words. I learned to sign my name in Russian. I mean, I didn't talk anywhere in public for years without the accent at all to get that character over. And so to go and be a completely brand new, rebrand myself, man, I'm like, I don't know, I want to do that, and so that was part of the reason. When he described the characters to me, out of respect, honestly, for the Road Warriors,
Right.
I thought, I don't want to do it for that reason, just out of respect for them. And then last but not least, because I do get that as well, did WWF ever reach out to me and try to recruit me over there? And to my knowledge, I met Vince McMahon one time in a gym in Las Vegas. And the only other time I had a conversation with him was at Road Warrior Hawk's funeral. That was it. And you might say, anybody who knows me, I'm loyal. I'm a loyalist, probably loyal to a fault. And I certainly see why, looking back, where I could have leveraged the WWF to either A, make more money with NWA, or B, go there and make more money. But Jim Crockett gave me a break, an opportunity of a lifetime. And so I was just really loyal to Jim Crockett, the Crockett family, and the NWA.
Even if you had stayed in the NWA, it just seems crazy to me that you weren't given that offer. I know you've jokingly put out there before that maybe it was left on an old answering machine and you didn't get that message. But to me, that character, even the Nikita Koloff character, that just seemed so in line with what they would have wanted that main event heel to be like against the Hulkamania character.
For Hogan, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it just seems so odd to me that they didn't throw that offer out there.
Yeah, it almost would have seemed natural, right? In fact,
Mm.
the magazines, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Bill Apter, and a lot of the magazines were kind of pitting us against each other, right? On the covers or articles inside the magazines. What if, another what if, right? What if, WrestleMania, the Russian Nightmare against the Hulkster, Hulk Hogan. And there's no question in my mind, I feel like we would have, had we been a main event, we would have at a WrestleMania, that we would have, drew money, made money for the organization. Many have said, Benji, that had I done that, one of the things they were doing at the time, though, was building up a top heel, putting him against Hogan, and then a lot of times that was the whole that was the peak of his career, so to speak. And then, he may never have had any other major main event matches, although he would have been used on the card. So some have said, yeah, I would have had that one super, big time match, but then what would have happened after that? None of us really know for sure. But yeah, just didn't happen, and it's fun to talk about, but kind of another, what would have happened if,
Somewhere that you did go, and it's kind of one of those um strange promotions that it had a Dark Side of the Ring, even an episode made about it, was Herb Abrams' UWF. You spent, I think it was possibly only one taping, a couple of tapings. It wasn't all that long. I mean, the promotion wasn't all that long either. But what was your time like there? And I mean, that in, the organization of that company must have been very different to what you were used to.
Yeah, for sure, and even the clips that you're showing there, people can see, whether it was the quality of filming, or the arenas and the auditoriums that we found ourselves in. Certainly wasn't the 25, 30, 35,000 that I maybe was in front of in the Great American Bash against Ric Flair, and so definitely a great experience. But something that yeah, I think it was Ken Patera there. I looked like at the end. Yeah, definitely a different experience from the other organizations.
Quickly before we let you go tonight, you made an appearance in the crowd for Sting's retirement match. I believe it was last year, going back now, at the Revolution event. What was it like to see how long his career managed to go, and the fact that you were facing him in the early 90s, late 80s, and now in 2024 he was still doing his last match?
So it was kind of, we were in again, Greensboro, right? Where the same arena where I dropped that US belt to Lex Luger, same building. And so it was, I guess, probably, Benji, the best word I could use is surreal. Um, and I'll describe it this way for your viewers. I'd always been in the ring, right? So in this case, I'm sitting ringside, behind legendary Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross, right? JR. So they're right in front of me. I'm sitting next to Magnum TA. So he's right next to me with his son. And then off to my right is Ric Flair. Off to my left is Ricky Steamboat. They're just sitting kind of ringside, so to speak. And then I'm just glancing around, looking at the 17,000 plus fans who were there that night for his retirement match. And so, Benji, I'm just kind of taking all of that in. I'm like, and I was kind of like, so this is what it's like to sit front row, right? Like, so I got the opportunity to have a firsthand fans experience, right? I'm like, wow, because I was so used to being the one in the ring, and now I'm sitting ringside, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So surreal definitely applies. To see Sting last as long as he did, kudos to Steve. Him and I are still good friends to this day. We talk on a regular basis, and then to get to see his two sons participate that night and have a small role in it. And then last but not least, here was the icing on the cake with the cherry on top. So I'm leaving that night. In fact, I'm looking right now over in the corner of the chair that I sat on at that retirement match. They let me take it home with me. So I'm looking at it right now over in the corner, March 3rd, 2024, Greensboro Coliseum. I'm walking out, Benji, with the chair. It's after midnight. A lot of people have gone. And I walk by this dressing room and I go, oh my gosh. It was the original babyface dressing room.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And nobody else is really around. It's just me. And so I go, you know what? I'm going to slip into that dressing room. So I walk into that dressing room and the expression, Benji, if the wall could talk, like, I mean, if those walls could tell just some of the stories, some of the conversations that took place in that dressing room over all those years of wrestling matches, I was just like, wow, I'm just looking around going, how many nights did I spend sitting in this dressing room, contemplating, preparing for a match to go out there, into that arena and entertain those fans. So what a great experience for me, one, to honor my friend Sting and be at his retirement match, and then to have that experience on my way out of the building was amazing.
Oh, Nikita, thank you so much for coming on the podcast tonight. We could talk for hours and hours, I'm sure, and I'd love to do deep dives into all these different feuds and everything. It almost seems rude to try and cram your career into such a short space of time, but that's what we got to do on these podcasts, I'm afraid.
Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully one day I'll get over your way. I mentioned at the top of the show. So my mom, let me just give you a quick backstory. Cool. My mom was born in England. Did you know that, Benji?
No, I didn't know.
My mom was born in England, up in the northern part by Carlisle, a little town called Hayden, Hayden. And several years ago at her passing, my sister, brother, and I, my brother-in-law, were able to take a 10-day tour across the pond over to England and go up north, all around all the little villages. Actually found the house she was born in 1919. Wow. Found the house she was born in, and able to, in her little village, eat at the local pub there, and just have just a walk down memory lane for my mom. So I have English roots, Benny. So one day I'm going to get over there hopefully meet you face to face.
Oh, 100%. You're very welcome anytime. That's an amazing story. I'd never heard that one before. But yeah, I think yeah, little things like that. I think they're always so special, aren't they? To go back to where like your parents or your grandparents used to live, and to try and see, like what it was like for them. I love those type of stories.
Yeah, back to the roots. And I just want to encourage, your viewers, if they want to connect with me on on any of social media, or find out more about the camp that Lex Luger and I do, or the books, they can order those right off. It's just easy, one-stop shop. It is Koloff.net, just the last name, Koloff.net. And actually, I do a podcast and a radio show of my own on a week-to-week basis, and they can even click to the link of my podcast there on that website, Koloff.net. I appreciate you having me on, Benny. Thank you.
No problem at all. We'll do a proper goodbye in a moment as we say goodbye to the audience here tonight. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. As you can see, I probably had a smile on my face for most of that podcast. Definitely one of my favorite guests and favorite, memories of my wrestling, when I was watching as a kid. Everything kind of came flooding back today. So, yeah, an amazing podcast for me, myself as well. But guys, look after yourselves. Please leave a like down below. Leave a comment as well. Subscribe to the channel. We are now up to 3,700 subscribers on the channel. So what a way to mark that occasion. But as always, guys, look after each other, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.